Neoliberalism feels to me like a spiritual belief, first and foremost. It's like a bunch of economists trying to translate mysticism in this idea of consciousness being this fundamental aspect of reality, this eternally pervasive undercurrent that guides us all. It's like economists tried to take this fabric of reality and translate it into an economic theory. It's really fascinating because one of the fundamental beliefs about it seems to be that if people just get out of the way, if we just get out of the way of ourselves, the economy, or something, then neoliberalism will be revealed as the true dominating force. And it's kind of ironic that in order for neoliberalism to exist, you have to actually remove people from the equation. And I think this gives us a lot of information about what's actually contained in the theory, which is ultimately just intellectualism. It's ultimately just a thought form. It's ultimately just a philosophy, the same as any other philosophy, really. And I love reading philosophy. It's one of my favorite things to read. I love reading theory because it becomes like this sort of background soundtrack. It becomes sort of this guiding force, right? Exactly. Just like they want. But when you're reading philosophy or theory or something, I mean, if you're a sane person, you don't read Freud and then wake up every day and live and die by Freud, for example. Because if you did, you would probably be very unwell. I understand where everyone is coming from. And that's why I love to read people's thoughts and people's stream of consciousness monologues, because I do understand where everyone's coming from. And because it just reaffirms the truth that I know to be in the center of everyone's conclusions. But if you abide by any strict rule of thought alone, and I do abide by a number of school of thoughts, but when you try to do it in isolation, you end up like a very two-dimensional person, and you end up amputating aspects of yourself. And I can't help but notice that neoliberalism contains much of that same structure that I get from philosophy and theory and spiritual rhetoric and religious doctrine. And I love all of these things very much. But you can't build an economic theory that is supposed to govern people if people are not in the equation. You can't expect people to remove themselves from the theory and for the theory to still function. When we do this as a spiritual practice, it does work because human beings are not the only force in the universe. We're definitely not the most dominating thing. We're not God. There's something larger and more cosmic that does order reality, and we're just one part of that reality. So when humans get out of the way in a spiritual sense, spirituality is still there, but the economy is not still there. The economy is only there when humans are in the picture. I really love eccentrics, and I love when people try to take things to extremes like this. When people get overly simplistic and reductive, I find it really relatable and human and so self-serving and just hilarious. So I find all of this genuinely fascinating. I actually find it so fascinating that I almost want to subscribe to the idea. And I think that in a lot of ways I do. it serves the parts of me that are privileged and want to be privileged and believe in privilege. And I actually think that a lot of the times when people are like pushing for these kind of very elitist ideologies, granted they might come from privilege, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes it comes from this like wish for everyone to live in this magical privileged world, and that if we just like think our way into it and like are zen enough about it, that we can make that a reality for everyone. Like we can somehow build a perfect, like we can somehow have both. I think that's a lot of what these conflicting ideologies rest in, is this like cognitive dissonance of wanting your theory to be a physical plane. And okay, I might be a little too zoomed out here because this is sort of the feeling that I've gotten. This is like the undercurrent that I've gotten from reading. But basically, a lot of neoliberal policies are founded on the idea of totally free markets, very limited government intervention. And in many ways, it seems like a radical idea. It does seem liberal. It seems free-spirited to say, like, everyone can just do what they want. Like, everyone's equal. Everyone just file lawsuits against each other in order to solve problems on a civil level. Like, let's just get the government out of our hair. So it seems kind of anti-authoritarian. It seems kind of badass whenever you frame it like that. But these policies never come into effect when everyone is on an equal playing field. And so they're applied universally to corporations and people who are already very wealthy. So it's like an equalizing effect that's already skewed more in one direction. It's also things like privatizing public services, which turns them into businesses, which are now driven by competition and profit and not just serving the public, which has to have an altruistic component in order to function. Like, economies have to have some separation between like what is a free-for-all and what is a consistent, stable thing for people. Neoliberalism is kind of leaning into like pure capitalism, and that is literally what they want. They believe that capitalism itself is like a pure thing, or that there is a pure form of capitalism that can be achieved. But when you do that, it's almost like throwing people back out into the wild, right? And so like, what's the point of building an economy if the economy itself is just a free-for-all and not even in the way that we all like? Like, sure, there's kind of a romantic, like, radical spiritual freedom involved in being like a wild thing, but there's also an insane danger, like the threat of death at every moment. So like, that's why we build societies and come together, is to mitigate that on some level. And the pure form of capitalism is kind of just like thrusting people back out into that, metaphorically. And then ironically, it's also about fiscal restraint in the government. So like never spending beyond your means, which seems really wise, but also kind of like contradictory to this like free-for-all open market. So it just really puts like all of the burden on the people, and then is framing it as like, we're giving you guys power and we're giving you guys autonomy.